Two SME owners each borrow 60,000 Ghana cedis in the same month. 5 years later, one of them has a net worth roughly 3 times what it was before the loan. The other has a net worth lower than before they ever walked into the bank, despite never missing a single monthly payment. Both loans were repaid, on schedule in full. That last detail is the one that should stop you. This is not a story about default. It is a story about something far more common and far less discussed. A loan can be serviced perfectly and still leave you poorer than when you started. This is LoanLogic Ghana. Today we're not asking whether you can afford a loan's monthly payment. You already know how to check that. We're asking the harder, more useful question. What does this loan actually do to your net worth 5 years from now, whether or not you ever miss a payment? By the end of this deep dive, you'll have a way to answer that question before you sign, not after. Part 1. Servicing a loan versus building wealth. Here is a distinction almost nobody teaches SME owners, and it is the single most important idea in this video. Affordability and wealth creation are two completely different questions, and a loan can pass the first test while failing the second one badly. Affordability asks whether your monthly cash flow covers the repayment. Wealth creation asks a different question entirely. When the last repayment is made, what do you actually own? Is there an asset, still worth something, sitting on the other side of that final payment? Or has the money simply been spent, leaving you with nothing but 5 years of interest paid and a business that looks exactly the same as it did before? That's the entire framework in one line. Wealth created by a loan equals the value of what you end up owning, minus everything the loan cost you to get there. Principal, interest, fees, and often the opportunity cost of what else that repayment capacity could have funded. When that number is positive, debt built wealth. When it's negative, even if every payment was made on time, debt quietly destroyed it. Almost every SME lending conversation in Ghana focuses entirely on the left side of that equation. Can you service it? Almost none focus on the right side. What does it leave behind? That imbalance is exactly why so many disciplined, responsible borrowers, people who never missed a payment in their lives, can still look up after 5 years and find their net worth has gone backward. Part 2. How debt creates wealth. 3 mechanisms. Let's get specific about the mechanisms because debt can be good is not useful advice on its own. There are exactly 3 ways borrowed money turns into real, durable wealth for an SME owner. Mechanism 1. Buying, appreciating, or income-generating assets with someone else's money. This is the cleanest version of debt-funded wealth. You borrow to acquire something that either appreciates over time or generates income independent of your day-to-day labor. Commercial property, processing equipment that expands output, a vehicle fleet that services long-term contracts. The bank's money buys the asset. The asset's earnings repay the bank. When the loan is finished, the asset remains fully owned, and it did not cost you personal savings to acquire it. This is precisely how equity gets built with borrowed capital. You are using leverage to acquire an asset faster than your own savings alone would allow, and the asset itself, not your salary, not your side income, does the work of repaying the debt. Mechanism 2. Protecting your business equity from dilution. This mechanism is underappreciated because it's invisible until you compare it against the alternative. If you need 200,000 Ghana cedis to expand, and you take on an equity investor instead of a loan, you have just permanently given away a slice of every future profit your business will ever make. Not for 5 years, forever. A well-structured loan, serviced and closed, costs you interest for a defined period and then disappears entirely. Debt is temporary. Equity dilution is permanent. For a business with a credible, cash-generating growth plan, debt is very often the wealth-preserving choice precisely because it doesn't ask for a permanent share of your upside. Mechanism 3. compounding business capacity faster than organic growth allows. A business reinvesting only its own retained earnings grows at the pace its own profits allow, often a slow, linear climb. A business that borrows intelligently against a proven, repeatable model can compress years of that organic growth into months, reaching scale, better supplier pricing, and stronger margins far sooner. That earlier scale then compounds on itself. The business that got to volume 2 years faster has 2 extra years of compounding growth working in its favor by the time the slower competitor catches up, if they ever do. Notice what all 3 mechanisms have in common. In every case, the borrowed money is converted into something that keeps producing value after the loan is gone. An asset, a preserved ownership stake, or a compounding growth trajectory. That conversion is the entire test. If you can't clearly name what the money converts into, that's the first warning sign. Part 3, How Debt Destroys Wealth, 3 Mechanisms. Now the other side, and this is the part most financial content skips, because debt destroys wealth sounds obvious until you see exactly how quietly and legally it happens, even to careful borrowers. Mechanism 1, financing consumption and calling it business investment. This is the most common wealth-destroying pattern in SME lending, and it rarely looks like fraud. It looks like reasonable, understandable decisions made under real pressure. A facility approved for business expansion partly funds new equipment and partly funds a more comfortable car, better school fees during a difficult month, or an upgraded office fit-out that has more to do with appearances than revenue. None of these are unreasonable needs, but none of them generate income, and none of them retain their value. The car depreciates the moment it leaves the lot. The school fees, however necessary, produce no return the loan can point to. What's left, at the end of the repayment term, is the interest paid and nothing durable acquired with it. The test here is brutally simple. For every cedi disbursed, can you name the specific asset or income stream it bought? If part of the answer is, it just went into general expenses, that portion of the loan has already left the wealth creation column and entered the wealth destruction one, regardless of how necessary the spending felt at the time. Mechanism 2, interest cost quietly exceeding the asset's total return. This is the mechanism that catches even disciplined borrowers because it requires math most people never actually do. It is entirely possible to borrow for a genuinely productive asset, use it exactly as planned, service every payment on time, and still lose money on the transaction overall because the total interest cost across the full tenor exceeded the total value the asset produced. This happens more often than most borrowers realize on longer facilities carrying higher rates, particularly when the asset's income ramps up slowly in its early months, while interest accrues on the full balance from day one. The only way to catch this before it happens is to run the comparison explicitly before signing total interest cost across the full loan term versus a realistic, not optimistic estimate of total value the financed asset or activity will generate over that same period. If the second number doesn't clearly and comfortably exceed the first, the loan is not a wealth-building transaction, whatever else it might be. Mechanism 3, rolling over debt instead of retiring it, forever delaying ownership. This is the slowest and least dramatic of the 3 mechanisms, which is exactly what makes it dangerous. A facility comes due. Rather than closing it, the borrower refinances into a new one, often to preserve cash flow in the short term. This can be a legitimate, sensible move in the right circumstances. But when it becomes a repeating pattern, refinance, 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 the borrower never actually reaches the point where an asset becomes fully unencumbered theirs. They are permanently a debtor rather than periodically becoming an owner. And every refinancing round typically adds fresh fees and resets the interest clock on top of a balance that isn't meaningfully shrinking. Years pass, the asset ages. The debt functionally doesn't. What ties these three together is that all of them can happen to a borrower who never defaults, never misses a payment, and looks, from the bank's side of the desk, like a model customer. Debt destruction in the SME context is far more often a quiet erosion than a dramatic collapse. That's what makes it so easy to miss until years have already passed. Part 4. The net worth test. Let's convert everything so far into a framework you can actually apply to a facility letter sitting in front of you. 4 questions, run in order before you sign. Question 1. What does this money convert into? Name the specific asset, income stream, or protected equity stake this loan produces. If your honest answer is general working capital or it'll help somehow, that is not a wealth-building answer. It may still be a necessary loan, but you should not expect it to leave you richer, and you should structure it as conservatively as possible precisely because of that. Question 2. Does the total value this asset or activity will realistically generate clearly exceed the total interest and fees across the full loan term? Not, will it cover the monthly payment? Will the full lifetime return beat the full lifetime cost with a real margin, not a hopeful one? Question 3. What is the alternative? Compare this loan against its real alternatives: organic, slower growth funded by retained earnings or equity financing that permanently dilutes ownership. Debt is often the wealth-preserving middle option between those two, but only if questions 1 and 2 already check out. Debt taken instead of a genuinely better-suited alternative can destroy wealth even while technically working. Question 4. At the end of the tenor, will you own something outright, or will you most likely be refinancing? Be honest here, using your own borrowing history as the evidence, not your intentions. If your pattern over the last several years has been rolling facilities forward rather than closing them out, that pattern is unlikely to break on its own with this loan, and the plan should account for that directly. For instance, by deliberately setting this facility's tenor short enough that refinancing isn't a realistic escape route. A loan that clears all 4 of these convincingly is very likely to build wealth. A loan that stumbles on even one deserves a second look before you sign, not necessarily a refusal, but a renegotiation of terms, tenor, or use of funds until it does clear. 2 SME owners borrowed the same amount in the same month, and both repaid every cedi on time. One ended up considerably wealthier. The other ended up worse off than before they signed. The difference was never whether the loan was serviced. It was what the money converted into, whether its total return ever actually beat its total cost, and whether an asset was left standing, fully owned, once the debt was gone. That is the entire idea to carry out of this video. Repayment is the minimum bar, not the finish line. The real finish line is what you're left holding once the repayment stops. If this changed how you'll read your next facility letter, that's exactly the point of this channel. Subscribe for more of the Insider's Vault series, where we keep breaking credit strategy down to the decisions that actually move the needle.